have been interviewing quite many newly qualified Alexander teachers recently, and a very common problem amongst them that they're bringing up is how to make a living as an Alexander teacher. Do you have any advice or any thoughts about that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think if you want to make a living, and quite rightly so, you should want to make a living if you've chosen it as a profession, then you'd want to have a certain amount of confidence in what you're able to deliver. You'd want to know that your work has real value, and that when you talk about it, you can talk about it in a way that inspires the person you want to offer it to. So what happens when a person qualifies is that the phone is not going to ring automatically. You're going to have to promote yourself. Now, my understanding is that promoting the Alexander technique isn't standing up and talking about the wonders of the Alexander technique, how brilliant Alexander was, all the wonderful things it can solve, because anyone can stand up and say, physiotherapy can do this, acupuncture can do this, nutritional therapy can do this, cranial osteopathy can do this, Tai Chi can do this, and yoga can do this, and breathing exercises. And we're in this marketplace of all the people that are offering solutions to the human condition. So I think you're on a lost wicket if that's the way you want to promote the Alexander technique. Now, here's the thing. In a really good training course, you're not learning knowledge, which is why it's not simply education. You're not learning a load of ideas and philosophies and procedures to pass on to other people. What are you doing primarily in an Alexander training school? Or what I think you should be doing primarily in an Alexander training school is developing something within you, internal capacities within yourself, within your psychophysical self, for non-reaction, for stillness in the face of turmoil, a capacity to listen to other people, the ability to listen to the whispers within your soul, the capacity for non-reaction to major stimuli that would normally put you wrong, that you have an ability to react less to or recover sooner rather than later. In other words, you're not in an Alexander training to learn the Alexander technique, whatever that is. You're learning to develop something deep within your soul. And that is the essence that you will be promoting when you want to promote yourself as a new teacher. What you want from someone who's listening to you give a talk, what you want them to appreciate is not your clever words or the clever history, but you, something about you who is delivering the message. They want to be buying into the messenger and not the message. Does that make sense? You want them to be able to say, I want some of what he's got or she's got, rather than, oh, I think I want what he's going to promise me. And I think we've misunderstood promotion. An Alexander technique teacher can spend thousands of pounds on the best promotional material, on Google rankings, on all the best paraphernalia, the best leaflets, the best business cards, develop the best lecture for a group of uninitiated. It doesn't work, and it shouldn't work. Because the people that are watching that, the people that are listening to you, are not simply interested in another salesman selling gimmicks, selling another remedy in another modality for the same condition. They've heard it all before. We're just one in a huge marketplace of offerings that promise to solve necks and backs and movement and postures, and yeah, we're one of many.
Yeah.
What is unique about us, what is really unique about the Alexander teacher, is that the Alexander teacher, unlike a physiotherapist that gets out a very nice ultrasound machine or an acupuncture needle, what the Alexander teacher has is something that has become embodied, hopefully, in a good training, where their essence, the way that they talk, the way they communicate, the way they deliver the message, is the message, and not the content. And then a person says, I think I want some of that. I think I want some of that quality. And then you've promoted something much deeper than the message. You've promoted something about the core of who you are and what is evolving in you as a capacity.
So what you just said about the marketing is actually connected with another difficulty that newly qualified teachers are bringing up, which is that they feel intimidated to experiment or to teach something that they find interesting for themselves, because there is quite a strong hierarchy structure in the Alexander technique where senior teachers are very highly respected and expected to show the way. And then after you've been teaching for 10 or 20 years, then you can say that, okay, I maybe know something. I maybe can start exploring a new way of teaching.
Yeah. Well, that's a very, very good point, Aina, and it's a point very close to my heart. I would like to be respected not as a teacher that says, this is the right way to work, follow me, but much more as a teacher that says, discover your own truth and follow it. And don't be bound by your teacher, your trainers, the first generation, so-called, of Alexander teachers, and not even bound by Alexander himself. In other words, if he came down today from heaven and didn't agree with the way you're teaching, I would affirm and I would actually encourage you to carry on teaching according to your own truth, even if it resulted in the disapproval of the originator, because that is the only way you can be inspired. It's the only way you'll be able to promote from who you are. It's the only way you'll be authentic and spontaneous, and it's the only way you'll grow. And so this idea of hierarchy, that someone has the truth, is actually anti the Alexander process. And I wouldn't want anybody to set themselves up as authorities on the principle. The principle isn't anything that could possibly be set in stone. There's no right way to teach the Alexander technique. The technique is an exploration of reactions to stimuli and a direct transmission of a use and a quality of being that supports non-reaction to those same stimuli and helps a pupil embody that, experience it, embody it, and maintain it in the face of their own struggles and stimuli in living. That's the Alexander technique. How can there be a formula? So let's go one stage further. And for teachers who are going to be watching this, or students, this may be quite relevant. Is there a right way to give Alexander directions, so-called directions? Do you have to say, let the neck be free to let the head go forwards and up, to let the back lengthen and widen before every act? I mean, the idea is bonkers. Having worked with about 5 or 6 or 7 first generation Alexander teachers, none of them said it in that particular way. Marjorie Barstow, Marjorie Barlow, Dr. Barlow, MacDonald, Carrington, Miss Goldie, They all had their own versions of how they would word these so-called directions at the same time as offering the experience with their hands. So I would like to liberate anybody and everybody from any formulaic way of doing anything. If you want to work in silence, that's okay with me. If you want to accompany the way you work with words, that's okay with me too. And then you could say, well, are there any principles? Are there any principles that I believe we should share? Well, yes. Probably the main principle I would say we should share is Alexander's injunction to never excite fear and shame, what he called the fear reflexes. So if you tell a person they're wrong and you point out all the ways that they're not doing it correctly, for most of the time that's going to result in shame, self-recrimination, self-diminishing, a sense of failure and anxiety and terror of carrying on doing it wrong and not getting the approval of the teacher. Now, if you really buy that, and I do very, very deeply, it changes the way you can teach. So for instance, if you like the idea of sticking a person in front of a mirror and pointing out all their defects, which was what Alexander apparently did at a certain stage and later abandoned it for those same reasons, you're not going to do that for very long when you realize that that finger pointing of defects actually excites the pupil's nervous system, makes them feel upset and judged, and does quite the opposite of evoking freedom and opening and change. These are the paradoxes of interaction. If you ask a person to be better, they'll end up getting a hell of a lot worse. And I'll go even further, although we probably haven't got the time for that today. If you ask yourself to be better, if you tell yourself all the time, I need my neck to be free, I need my head to go forwards and up, and I need to improve and lengthen and widen, what you're really saying very deep down is that I'm not okay the way I am now and I have to improve. That I'm not okay the way I am now and I want to improve. Now that doesn't mean that you don't want to solve problems. Yes, you do. But if you constantly tell yourself you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough, I've got to be more, it creates a certain conflict. And it activates what Alexander called end gaining, or what we would call the trying mind. And it's pretty impossible to send these lovely wishful directions of freedom without really wanting them to happen, with a certain efforting, even subtle, a certain efforting of the mind, where there's a contrast and a conflict between who I am right now and who I want to be in the future, more free, more expansive. And this is the paradox of Alexander teaching. The paradox is that actually, when you allow a person to be just the way they are and you put the hands on, you place your hands on and guide them from a place of non-trying, you can't get anything wrong, you're okay the way you are, of non-judgment. That attitude, that essential attitude, is the attitude that frees necks and frees the system and helps it feel safe enough to incrementally change and free up. And the opposite is true. When you keep on pointing a finger and pointing out defects and telling people they have to direct before every act, telling them they're not good enough, telling them that when in 20 years there may be a good enough teacher, and that the real Alexander teachers are somewhere out there in this hierarchy of power, that is one sure way to make them freeze and tighten and constrict and contract and to be less than who they are.
So there seems to be two types of teachers. The other half says that we are underqualified because 3 years is not very much to train to become an Alexander teacher. And then the other half would like to see much more teachers doing much more, offering much more workshops and trainings for different kinds of people. So where do you position yourself between those two extremes?
Well, I don't think there's only two Alexander types. I think for every two Alexander teachers, there's probably 3 opinions. So there are many ways of looking at this. I personally am a teacher trainer. I have a school. I'm very happy to send my students out after 3 years with a certificate and say, go for it, start. And see the beginning of your teaching as an ongoing journey. And you will keep on refining and developing and improving your capacities over time, organically. But yes, you're ready. After 3 years of developing and working on yourself in a good school, you have enough capacity to offer something of value to someone who's coming through your door. Very much so. The idea of waiting for perfection is another way of freezing yourself, of terrorizing yourself. I'm not as good as that teacher. Well, that's a myth too. How do you know? How do you know? It's very, very easy to see all good things out there in other people and to see nothing inside ourselves. To see the older Alexander teachers, the experienced Alexander teachers as possessing all good things, and us new trainees, new teachers, of never reaching the pinnacle of greatness. And the further we are from Alexander, we're further and further diminished. And I think it's a load of nonsense. A trainee may be much, much further on the road than Alexander was after 10 years of exploring himself in front of mirrors. There's no need to look at the past generations as anything superior or more advanced than the personal and deep work you're doing for yourself. And conversely, an Alexander teacher that has been teaching 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years are fallible and remain human and remain very much a part of the human condition, that we don't exit the human condition. And yes, Alexander teachers react. Alexander teachers lose their cool. Alexander teachers are not always the perfect examples of poise and grace and composure and reason, not at all. And we get things wrong and we screw up and we misunderstand ourselves and others. And we've got a long way to go. And so I would encourage all teachers to just work, to start with a certain amount of humility and a certain amount of confidence in each hand. Humility and confidence, and hold both. Enough confidence to be able to say, after 3 years of dedicating myself and my mind and body to evolving capacities for stillness and non-reaction, I've got something to offer someone that's got none of that, that hasn't developed that at all. That after 1600 hours, after 3 years, my way of being, the qualities I've cultivated, can help another person move in the right direction to develop their own abilities. And I can offer that as a new teacher. And at the other time, on the humility side, the pond is deep and I hardly know myself and I've got a long way to go, and I'll keep on refining and tuning myself to the nth degree. And even then, I'll be nowhere near this ideal of perfection, which doesn't exist, Alexander wasn't perfect. He wrote a load of things that weren't perfect. He misunderstood. He evolved. He changed his mind frequently. The earlier generation of teachers sometimes perhaps were too in awe of Alexander to question too much. Maybe now that we are a bit more liberated from that time era, we can question for ourselves, and as I said, to discover what's true and to teach from your own truth, to be who you are, a unique teacher, offering your understanding of use of self with another human being. So I don't know where I fit in this either or type of Alexander teachers. It's probably both and.